Welcome back. We're going to be taking a look at Chapter 11 sponsorship programs here in Marketing 362. And as you can see, kind of in the background, one of my key sponsors currently now is Huck Performance Fishing Gear. And that's become a very lucrative contract for me. And being, as you well know, a little bit of a big deal. I did want to show, previous in my career, basketball was a big part of my athletic background. And as you can see, my sponsorship with Franklin, a really key brand in the basketball world. And now that has kind of run its course, probably at this point, in contingency plans, I've worked towards a relationship with Huck Performance Fishing, and they quickly jumped on board with me. Although I'm not discounting my basketball career being completely done, I'm still counting on Coach E to maybe give me the nod in an Uncle Drew-esque type fashion, maybe for next year to hang another banner up there in Hanson. We'll see if he comes through for me. But that being said, my relationship with Huck Fishing, and you can see kind of from the background there, I really don't like the notoriety and have kind of rode that train and have grown weary of just kind of this high profile. So I always ask them not to show my face in all of our advertisements and sponsorship pieces that they put out there. So as you can see, I've asked them to do that. But that being said, we're going to dive into Chapter 11 and just do a quick dive into some of the key aspects and points of sponsorships, kind of as that fifth element of the promotion mix or the marketing mix that we didn't talk about in our last time together. But yet a really key avenue for revenue and ways to be able to market brands, whether it's in sport or out of sport. I'm going to share my screen and dive in here real quick with this presentation and talk through just some of the main aspects of sponsorships as we think about that in the conversation with sports sales and marketing. And as you well know, I threw a few pictures in here, but there is a wide variety of sponsorship opportunities through sport or in sport. As you can see, the Pepsi halftime show has become one of the biggest events in our country in a cultural sense and obviously in a marketing and advertising sense. If you're a soccer or football person, clearly one of the things on the uniform or the kit for soccer players has become a sponsorship piece, and most of the teams and clubs across the pond have dove into that, and now we're starting to see that even in the professional leagues here in the United States as well, with sponsorship pieces. And then lastly, kind of over here, you can see, and I should know, and I don't know what stadium that is, but you can see the multiple opportunities for sponsorships there relative to that. A dog for sale. If anybody interested, just reach out and connect. But you can see opportunities abound in the sport world. And here I put this one up just for Nate. NASCAR is one of the U.S. Leagues or brands or whatever you want to say that has done a large amount of work relative to sponsorships, and particularly on the cars and on the uniforms of its drivers. But ultimately, you can see the definition there. But what it basically boils down to is the opportunity to be able to associate a brand with a product in some way, shape, or form, and that street kind of goes both directions on which way that works, or potentially with a person, an endorsement, all of those types of things to gain some level of a competitive advantage in the marketplace. One of the pieces that we just wanted to make you aware of, and I'm sure this is not a big surprise, is just the growth of sponsorships in the United States, particularly in the sport world. And you can read through this, but we're not talking about millions of dollars. We're talking billions of dollars. And this one was kind of fun for me. I put up, as we've talked anecdotally from time to time about esports, and Honda is a brand that obviously is very prominent here in the United States, ultimately uh, centered in Japan, but diving into the esport market. And we're seeing some. MasterCard has done that. I read something, and people, I think, in companies and brands are starting to recognize the fast growth in the esport world and the opportunities that that's going to provide in terms of sponsorships. As a side note, and one of the things in the book, and I've got it over here, and I got to flip through the pages, but really and it spent. I'm going to find it here. There we go. Table 11.7 on page 467, and it spent, I don't know, 7 or 8 pages um, relative to a golf tournament, professional golf tournament, and all of the sponsorship opportunities, kind of the cost analysis, return of investment on what you might expect out of that, and so forth. Anything from tickets to caddy bibs to the grandstands to food tents. Um, Even down to sometimes even the flags on the in the holes on the flag sticks, all kinds of just amazing opportunities that are provided through something like a professional golf event. And if there's a way to sell space in an advertising or a sponsorship sense, they're probably going to try to find a way to do that. So the growth has been immense in the United States, and these statistics are a few years old, as you can see, but obviously a really important part of the promotion or marketing mix as we think about it. One of the things that was interesting to me, and I've tried to get kind of a variety of pictures in this particular presentation just to kind of show the broad scope of sponsorship opportunities here with MMA. And I am certainly not an MMA fan by any stretch, but you can see even on the canvas there within their ring, just a multitude of opportunities. And you take something like Monster energy drinks, and is that a good fit with MMA? I think certainly it is, because MMA is kind of out on that periphery edge of violent, edgy personalities, and that certainly fits kind of the MO with Monster energy drinks and so forth. But as companies think about it, ultimately their job, they're not looking to replace advertising and sales campaigns and so forth, but ultimately trying to build some awareness in a mass audience context. So as people are watching events or participating events, and that kind of association of your brand with that event, and ultimately trying to build those partnerships and those relationships, and building revenue for the brand or for the product. And ultimately that association hopefully is a two-way street back and forth. So I got to keep moving my picture around here, but why sponsor? And I'm not going to read down through those, but one of the ones that really jumps out at me in the biggest professional sport market in America is the NFL. And you can see there that, and this goes back a couple of years, but 1.4, just shy of $1.4 billion in 18-19 was tied into sponsorships with the NFL. And that's just mind-boggling, the amount of revenue. And that's not over 10 years or anything. That's over 1 year of an NFL season. So as you can imagine, I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, just talking about COVID-19 and the loss of revenue that is being created by that, with pretty much every professional league, college, everything coming to a standstill, and the amount of revenue and dollars that are being lost is just mind-blowing. So you can see kind of some of the reasons that sponsorships, why would someone dive into a sponsorship relationship with a product or with a brand? And just all kinds of opportunities, from awareness and visibility of your brand to keeping up with the competition, using it as a way with your clientele in an entertainment sense, and so forth. So just a wide variety of opportunities that we indulge and engage in sponsorships in sports. So here, some of the objectives, and there's obviously the primary thing is ultimately we want to use sponsorships to drive sales, to increase revenue. That's pretty much goes without saying, I think. And then indirectly, you're talking more about awareness, and again, as I mentioned, knowing what the competition is doing and making sure your brand is visible and aware, and you aren't losing a foothold relative to your brand with your competition. Building relationships, building your image, and again, uh, looking for ways to generate sales. And you can see here, there's kind of uh, a picture here that kind of talks through a little bit of the promotional process, if you will. Delivering brand experiences, enhancing your image, providing content, building those relationships, and generating exposure, all reasons to enter into sponsorship opportunities and relationships in an objective sense. And then now kind of working through this process, and we're not going to go through this in great detail, but in understanding that just like in anything in life, it starts with the opportunity for planning. You come up with a game plan, you think about who you want to align with, how you want to do it, what channels you want to use in terms of those sponsorships, and the ways that you want to get your brand out there through events or products. And then ultimately you're going to do that. You're going to talk about your budget side of it, working to acquire sponsorships, because just because you want to do it doesn't mean that brand necessarily wants to align with you as well. So those are usually, we talked last chapter about personal selling and relational selling. That's where that comes into play. Sending emails and say, hey, sponsor us is great, but it definitely takes that relationship and that face-to-face conversation ultimately to get there. And then executing the sponsorship, how you're going to do that, the cost, building in a contract for that relationship is really important. And then at the end, it's all about controls, understanding how effective was this? What was the return of investment? How did it perform? And there are certainly plenty of marketing agencies out there that can help facilitate the performance of a particular sponsorship and that return on investment. So all part of that process as you think through acquiring sponsorships for your brand. This is a really fun part for me. It's kind of anecdotal and a side note, but this whole concept of ambush marketing, and I think we talked about this, and we're going to watch a video here in just a minute. Actually, I think we're not going to watch it, but when you pull up the PowerPoint, you certainly can. A great way that a car company used the Super Bowl, and I think it goes back 3 or 4 years now, maybe to 2015 with Volvo, but just kind of a fun way that they ambushed the advertising and the sponsorships of other car companies during the Super Bowl, who spent a large amount of money to put advertisements and commercials in the Super Bowl, and Volvo kind of ambushed that, and was kind of a fun way to see that. But here's another example, kind of a cool one. This was, I think, from the city of Montreal, and Apple had put out their, and this goes back a few years clearly, but their Nano kind of iPods or whatever, kind of those mini ones with the small screen and so forth. And they were touting the different color choices, and making it look like they had been painted. And this company, Rona, was a paint company, and they were touting the fact that they recycle paint. So, paint that you've gotten and are no longer using can recycle and so forth. But so they placed a banner right below the billboard, and didn't obviously pay for that, other than they had to pay for the creation of that banner. So kind of a fun way to be able to associate with something without, nothing illegal, but looking for creative ways to capitalize on other people's dollars spent and marketing dollars. Kind of a fun thing, kind of a side note to this whole conversation. We are not going to watch this video, but I would encourage you to do that. And again, the idea was that Volvo, anytime a car commercial came on during the Super Bowl, they asked you to tweet out, and they gave away, I can't remember what the number was, 3 or 4 vehicles. So it did cost them something, on that side of things, but in comparison with what those companies were paying for those advertising minutes, was significant. So kind of a fun way to kind of look at that. Lastly, and we're just getting ready to wind it down here, but ultimately, I don't know if you see that or not, but I'm moving my picture around. But there's a sport event pyramid, and you can just see ultimately as you are making decisions about sponsorships, you can imagine there's things all the way from local events, kind of at the bottom of the pyramid, and working its way up to global events. And obviously, the further up that pyramid you go, let's see, there we go. The further you go up that pyramid, the greater the cost. I mean, in terms of investment in dollars, but the greater their reach. So you think about global events, immediately comes on mind things like the Olympics, World Cup soccer, those types of events. People pay top dollar to be a part of the sponsorship program for those types of events. But as you can imagine, their reach is significant, and you kind of work your way down. Like I'll think of something local, like the Meyer State Games um, in the state of Michigan would be more of a regional type of event. So it has a little bit better reach than something that we might do just here in Grand Rapids, even though it's housed or hosted here in Grand Rapids. But you have teams coming from all over the state and potentially the region to do that. And so as you think about that pyramid, the further you go up, the more it's going to cost, but the greater the reach and the greater the potential for return on investment. And so just an important thing as you're making those decisions. Then ultimately, and again, I'm not going to read down through all of these, but these are some questions. How do we choose who to sponsor? Who's a good alignment? So one of the brands that's kind of an interesting one to me is Red Bull. And kind of that performance energy drink, and who are they aligning themselves with? And I'm going to jump real quick because I did a little work just looking at their website, and these are the types of activities and sports and things that they are partnering themselves with. So gaming and esports, kind of BMX in the bike world, trail biking, winter sports of snowboarding, skiing, ice skating, downhill ice cross. I don't even know what that is. Biathlon. Culturally, what are they doing in the music and pop culture world? Water sports, motorsports. So you can see these are all kind of like high risk, kind of edgy type of sports, and those are the ones that a brand like Red Bull is going to align themselves with. So those are the types of things. What makes sense? You don't see Red Bull on the PGA Tour as an example, because that's a totally different market, different demographic. You're seeing like financial investors, wealth advisors. Sometimes you're like with the PGA, sometimes you're seeing things like prescription drugs for blood clots, hypertension, high blood pressure, hypertension, those types of things that really fit that market a lot better. So it's important as you're thinking about choosing your sponsorships that, as one piece of the puzzle is the alignment of that brand with your product, cost, all of those types of things, the reach and everything, and ultimately a return on investment. So that kind of is a broad sweep view of sponsorships, the importance of sponsorships. As you work through this chapter, in one of the projects I took off the plate was doing a sponsorship proposal, but in its place, I'm going to ask you to watch the video from Jesse Campbell, our sports information director at Cornerstone, and he gives some great insights into the value of sponsorships for Cornerstone. And maybe some things in there that you didn't realize. Those relationships are really critical ultimately to not just the Cornerstone brand, but to connections with alumni, and obviously to the bottom line, the financial aspect of it is really critical as well. So that kind of buttons us up on sponsorships. And if at any time you need anything, please reach out and we will be happy to connect with you. Take care. God bless.